Alabama Lass, 100 metres to go, strikes the front. Barrakill bursting through, and Barrakill got the split at one.
And the one I suppose I really should add to this, only because we didn't mention him yesterday, with the track upgrade, Lindemann is a duffer, not a duck, a duffer on wet ground. He gets on a dry ground, and the way you described the race yesterday, maybe he gets it on his terms, particularly if you take in multis. Lindemann might run you a race up front.
I'd say it's a monster chance.
Lindemann's giving a terrific side in the lead. Inside the 200, Lindemann 2 in front of Sir Delius is giving good chase now. Lindemann and Sir Delius. Lindemann trying to cling on just. Lindemann a half head of line.
Pericles is first up. I reckon they will want to come to play here because it's Bjorn Baker first start for the Blue Jackets. Of course, they were all dispersed via the James Cummings move and to put their horses elsewhere. I reckon Bjorn will want to put on a show for the Godolphin team. So his level of capability is real. In fact, it was this meeting last year at Moonee Valley, albeit he was second up there, where he was dynamic winning at Moonee Valley. I think it was a +2.5. So he's a genuinely good horse.
He's had a good run behind and presents the challenge. Just in front, Private Eye, but now Pericles moved up with your blessing in the middle. It's Pericles coming down the middle part of the track, and Pericles having his first run for Bjorn Baker draws away for a big win on the tramway.
And Headwall, let's round off with Headwall, probably the unluckiest sprinter in Australia, and one of those was genuinely unlucky in the TJ Smith running second. Jimmy Starr ran third. What's his readiness like for tomorrow? I assume both Jetty Bill and Headwall are trying to put on a show tomorrow to try and get a slot for the Everest.
Well, this is the other horse that's locked in for an excellent first up performance over the 1,000 metres. Again, I don't know if Matthew Smith's also might be a little bit unlucky because that was a booming last 400 metres plus 7.2. It was a big ripcord, but it was 800 metres. The signal's there. This horse is like, they have got this horse already simulating what it was doing back in April. No question about that. They're already at that level with this horse. Now, that was the 1,200 metres. We go back to April. But this is where the horse is at. Primed up, ready to go. Big showing first up.
Straka races to the lead. Headwall's claiming it. Lady Shenandoah's into the clear now. It's Headwall getting in front. Lady Shenandoah's charging home. Headwall made a statement, scraped in Headwall.
And now on PG Podcast Network, it's time for the year-round carnival with Vince Accardi and your host, Racetrack Ralphy.
And starting off with a little bit of Kylie Minogue, can't get you out of my head, as Headwall won the Concord, the big $1 million race at Randwick. There are other highlights, of course, including Lindemann and Nash for Cash up front, and Moonee Valley. The Group 1 was the Moya, won by Barrakill. Let's pull it all apart with Vince Accardi from Daily Sectionals. Good morning, mate.
Yeah, good morning, Rob. You can't get it out of your head. Is that what the problem is with Kylie Minogue?
Well, I'll tell you what, with Headwall winning...
Yes.
And just beating Lady Shenandoah, is there some stuff to pull apart there? So firstly, how did Randwick play?
Yeah, well, the good four was supposed to be the number, right? That was the plan. Did they really get there? Well, we just do the brief mathematics. Race 1 minus 8.8. That's not good for. Race 2 minus 6.9. I wouldn't think that is either. But race 3 onwards... Well, I reckon we stayed in the S5 range. Yeah. S5, G4, back half of the card.
Nice. So, of course, the rail was at 4 metres, and that, as we discussed on Friday in our preview podcast, that meant you didn't need to go searching too far for the lanes because you're only 3 or 4 off the fence and you were going to get there. So the leaders had their chance if ridden right.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, and pretty much on the number right throughout the whole day that 6 to 12 or 6 to 11 were dominating all day, and in terms of your position, yep, you could be midfielder, you could be leading, and you could be back.
So let's start with in stakes race order, I guess you say, because by goodness, there was a a nice little stakes race to watch, even though, as we discussed, by the time Saturday came around, it was not a betting proposition with Travolta because the fields were obviously decimated down to 5 runners and there was going to be uncertain tempo. Well, we got some certain tempo. What did J-Mac do on changing of the guard, and how did he get away with just beating Travolta?
Yeah, well, first of all, too smart. 9.4 lengths below benchmark. So really, for a small field, he was travelling at a typical speed, like if there was a dozen horses.
Right.
Just cruising along, below what you consider to be average. I wouldn't call it very slow, but I'd just call it soft tempo. Anywhere between 6 to 10 lengths is like in that zone. We're not walking, but everybody else was walking. All the other runners fell asleep. They were, I don't know what they were thinking, but they were 17 to 20 lengths below benchmark. That's walking.
Yes.
So what did we have? He's made that, I will call it the willow move in the mid. He's put the burners on from 9.4 below to plus 3.3. His mid-race squeeze was 12.7 lengths. Therefore, every other runner in the race has had to produce literally a 4-second split time of increased pace. So in terms of benchmark performances, anywhere between 24 and 27 lengths mid-race squeeze to put themselves potentially in the race.
So
and that's
the mid-race measurement, for those just picking up our work for the first time, is measuring a horse from the 800-metre mark to the 400-metre mark as if the race was starting there. So Travolta, compared to changing the guard, what was the difference in exertion just in that section?
Well, 12.7 lengths was the exertion for the winner, and Travolta 24.6.
Wonder why I couldn't pick it up.
Yeah, it's good night. You can. I don't understand it still. How is that possible that they allowed that horse to do that? I know you look at it on the screen, you think, oh, he's moving, but he's not. He's virtually 10 lengths below benchmark. I don't get it.
So to use I won't say his name because it was a private conversation, but a great trainer once said, "Can you just leave your sleeping bag and pillow in the jockey's room?" There was a bit of sleeping bag in the jockey's room.
Yeah.
A nice race 5. And in fact, even though it wasn't a stakes race, it was dominated by those on pace. The one query we sort of had was the bit of heavy track to dry track form. So Fully Lit dominated on a heavy track. Shishisha was legless on the heavy track in its previous run. Good effort, though, jumping from 1,100 to the mile to be able to win. And it seems like they've run okay time for a benchmark race.
Yeah, I felt the performance ultimately was good to see whether it could sort of take that next step, and I felt that it did. They've gone out virtually benchmark through that first split time, sort of giving that sort of franking the back half of the card. We were in that zone, potentially, good 4 track. The winner, 2.5 lengths below benchmark first section, prime position in terms of where the horse was placed. The next thing was there wasn't any big movement in the 8 to 400 metre section, but still above benchmark. All horses were marginally above, and we had a little bit of a kick home over the last 400 with Shishisha running plus 3.6, Fully Lit plus 1.6 last 400. Effort's good for both horses, Ralphy.
The Furious is for the fillies. Now, the pre-race thinking, and you can listen back to any of our preview podcasts on the Monday, which is the Friday is our deep dive into the stakes races, and the Saturday we talk all business once we've straightened things up and got some scratching through, etc. On both Friday and Saturday, Vince, your head scratch within the law was, under this circumstance with the rail out 4 metres, you could just be too far back in an impossible position. At Apocalyptic, the challenge was she going to really come to play? Now, she ended up easing in the market from the Friday, and I suppose others had that same query. Savvy Hell was the rock-solid favourite. What did Apocalyptic do first up, and was within the law in an impossible position due to the barrier?
Yeah, well, Apocalyptic final performance, minus 1.1, ranked 23. So that's fair. I feel that's reasonable. Like, it just missed that top 20 cutoff. 0.5 below benchmark first split time. Within the law, 5.7 lengths below benchmark. Now, the leader, which finished last, Wanton Lass, was plus 1.6. So speed in the race, it was there. It was good pace. The interesting part, there was a genuine slackening of pace between the 8 and the 4. Now, it wasn't heavy. This probably, when it's like 1 or 2 lengths and you're not really breaking benchmark early, it's not going to have a monster impact on you. And it was definitely, in my view, in favour for Pop Collective having that slight slowdown at 2.7 lengths. Within the Law, has had to put in a big move and surged 5 lengths, the quickest in the field. That was probably the tough part for the horse. That's just to get yourself into the race. And I felt that the overall last 200 metres, 400 metres was like a pass mark. The winner, 0.3 below benchmark. Turapaka was 1.6 above, and Within the Law, 1.3. So probably Within the Law's squeeze in the middle, Ralphy, was too much for the horse.
On the Friday and the Saturday, you said the value runner was Tupacaro. It just missed.
Yep.
Probably by look at the numbers here, it's probably almost had the perfect race shape. But given it's got a better further profile already, and just it's from its 2-year-old days, given they had to throw at the stumps at the Group 1 mile, they would have been delighted with this return.
Oh yeah, very, very happy with that. Good. It was actually an excellent distribution of energy overall for the horse in terms of what it did. A little bit of a blemish between the 6 and the 400, which every horse had. Ultimately, hard to knock the performance, Ralphie. Very, very hard to knock the performance.
All right, let's get to the Chelmsford, and I suppose, Vince, once you don't participate in a race, and I know you wouldn't have because Chia Wolf into $1.75, you couldn't have got your $1.30 place on side. You can just sit back and watch a genius at work, can't you? And as we said on the Sunday morning, this is the one dangerous horse was Lindemann, because back on top of the joy, doesn't handle the wet. We said it nice and clearly, as you heard in the opener. The one dangerous part was Nash on a front runner and just having a race on his terms. What did he do?
Yeah, well, we've got a couple of really big highlights here with this horse, Ralphie. First of all, realistically, 1.1 lengths below benchmark. Good tempo. It's not explosive. It's just controlled. Maybe overall, he's set the theme of good speed, where most of the other horses were dealing with their early speed anywhere between sort of 3 and 8 lengths below benchmark. So I thought that was really interesting. His decisive move had to have come in the mid-race, Ralphie, even though it wasn't huge. I mean, the field speed average move in the mid was like 2.4. Lindemann's gone 3.5 above. So he's made a good move, not overtaxing the horse. So the squeeze was 4.6. There was a bunch of horses there, Ralphie, that were between 9 and 12 length mid-race squeeze in a mile race. And of course, the customary brilliance of Nash. He's always going to have some petrol left at the end. Last 400 metres plus 1.1. Franked between the finish line at last 200 metres with a 0.2 above. And you can clearly see it in the hidden fractions between the 6 and the 4. This is when he gunned it. He said, we're going here, because he went from 0.2 above to plus 3.2 and held them all off.
26th best last 600 a day, 63rd best last 200 a day. That was just a taper. He was completely all out in the line, and that Vince is a genius at work, winning by a nose. But Sir Delius, my meme, is this a monster for the spring or what?
Yeah, it is. Well, both horses, Ralphie. Lindemann plus 2.7. Mind you, got the honours for the day. Sir Delius plus 2.5. There's a breakaway, right, to third and fourth. Now, you put the lens on Lindemann just for a moment and have a look at his historical. He's come back sensational, after that one run, which was, like you said, it was a genuine heavy track. And he's just springboarded into pretty much his top sort of 3-4 runs of last preparation. Now, Sir Delius. Yep, sorry. Yep.
I was just going to say, he's 6 wins from 32 starts now, but the context with Lindemann is he spent most of his career in Group 1 racing against Animo and Via Sestino. Well,
yep.
You're not going to get a good strike rate at that level when there's him, but he's a rock-solid customer, about +3 absolute tops. But Sir Delius, let's talk about it now, because Lindemann was aimed to race near his best on Saturday. Sir Delius is aimed at the Melbourne Cup. What do you think we've learned on Saturday after his dynamic closing sprint at Doomben, but out of traffic where he really could only sprint for the last 200 metres?
Yeah, well, we've seen another step forward from an Australian point of view in terms of where this horse is heading, plus 2.5. His position in running, given that he's a staying horse, to be travelling 3.3 lengths below benchmark, a couple of lengths off the lead speed, was excellent just within its own right. I guess that part didn't surprise me, that just the way he'd been trialling, that he was going to have some speed in the legs potentially, and he had it on display. The move in the mid-race, he was just really following the architecture of the race, going plus 2.9. What cannot be denied, though, was the revving up of the engines over the last 400 metres, plus 3.7. And last 200 metres was plus 2.2. He was just starting to get into work, Ralphy. So, I don't know. Where do you reckon he's going to go next? Because he looks like the sort of horse that might be just starting to win all the future races.
I was annoyed at myself. I might have a look while I'm talking to you. I thought this could be a Cox Plate spec because
Right.
when they won the Melbourne Cup with Fiorente, they went via the Cox Plate twice. And once he didn't win, and the second attempt he won. And I like seeing what stables do. Histories tend to repeat.
Yep.
I wonder if he goes through the Cox Plate. Now, of course, he still has to beat at this stage VS Theatre and Treasure at the moment, but we haven't got a ceiling on this horse yet, have we?
Oh no. We're rocketing up. We're rocketing up in a sharp way, Ralphie.
So he's obviously deep in the market at the Melbourne Cup, but I just wonder if he goes via the Cox Plate, if he's going to run you a big race there. Speaking of big races and Melbourne Cup horses, Vauban, he's clearly aimed at only one race, and he too, well, he's beaten 2 lengths, but if you say, well, here's your kickoff, 0.6 above benchmark, 6th best of the day, and you've got the Melbourne Cup in 2.5 months, or 2 months. That's an exciting time.
It is, and of course, you could sort of see in the barrier trials that perhaps, Sir Dilius is somewhat a little bit more forward, or maybe just a different approach. But Sir Dilius on the day had its number in every split.
Exciting times there. Now let's get to the favourite, Chia Wolf. It's one thing to say position and running, and Nash got the tempo right and all that, but I think it had to be, call it disappointing, don't we?
Well, I'm going to ask you this. The first thing is, had an expectation it was going to be on the fence. That was me talking, and that was going to be probably one of the challenges with the horse, but he wasn't. So I thought that's a tick. Now he's the cross blend. And again, this is post-race, Ralphie, right? I was not expecting a fast pace. Mind you, this horse wasn't travelling fast. But if we compare it to the start before, 22.2 lengths below benchmark versus 6.7, there's a massive shift in energy distribution from one run to the other. And they're 14 days apart, right? This, I felt, is on display. Because the horse is mid. Okay, we can say he's just following the line of the pack, and I can say, yep, that makes sense. But the last 400, only a plus 4.2. How much do you feel the horse might have been affected by that? And was it you that said to me, Ralphie, that it wasn't going to be spot on for this race, or did I hear that from the trainer? I don't know.
Well, absolutely. So I'll get to that because I always like doing the work with you on the Friday, and then I'll dive into all the interviews. And on the Saturday, the one thing Joe Pride made a point of was we expect him to win. Okay, that's just I suppose the horse was favourite. What's he going to say? But he said, but make no mistake, this horse is aimed at the King Charles to peak mid-October. So that's 6 weeks away. So I would think under that lens, rather than the market smashing it into $1.70, under that lens, it's probably a pass mark because his grand final is 6 weeks away.
Yeah, and then when you look at the fractional split, I feel it gives you the answer. Peaking between the 6 and the 4, and remembering what we said, that 1S run-to-run comparison, virtually a 16 lengths variation from one run to the other, the horse actually started tapering in the negative inside the 500 metre mark to the finish line and actually lost the overall velocity of 1.5 lengths. That's all conditioning, Ralphie. That's why we didn't see the finish.
It would be fair to say Joe Pride's more Chris Waller, Bart Cummings than Waterhouse type, isn't he? So he's sort of more your peak and grand final day than try and win all the way through and win the grand final, if that's fair.
Yeah. He's and he can be pretty good at that. Yep.
So Bailey's asked, it's a general question, but it's actually also works specifically for Cheerwolf. Just want to know, and we always get our members an opportunity to ask questions on the Sunday. Just want to know how Vince treats a heavy track run for horses next start. For example, does a wet track have a negative effect next start compared to dry, or is it more race shape dependent on those conditions?
Well, the heavy track can have some impact for sure, and the big exertion of 17.5 lengths. This could be, in some cases, viewed upon as that could have flattened the horse older. That is possible, very, very possible. But here's what I've always sort of maintained for myself personally over the years, Ralph, is if you're potentially flattened and this horse could have had that signal, it all depends on what happens at your subsequent start in terms of pace. Now, I was personally forecasting the race to be somewhere around 6 to 10 lengths below benchmark first split time. Yeah, I did sort of say, in a crazy way, there's a chance maybe of benchmark possibilities based on a few factors in the race, but I personally felt that they were a lower probability. Now, if we take away Lindemann, the pace was definitely softer, but the reality was, yes, I feel that the impact and what Bailey just articulated about, what does that mean for a heavy track and how do you read it? You could, without too many, sort of trying to figure it out, that may have had an effect as well. And the franking that they've pretty much started off the lead speed at 1 length below wouldn't have helped the horse. And it was visible. It was visible because he had no finish, Ralphie. And this is not the customary structure of this horse.
Let's get to the Concord Headwall 1. I've learned a lot of things off your vids, but one old racing truism that I reckon always stands up is 1,000-metre horses, 1,000-metre races. Headwall is an absolute beauty. He came to play, and it wasn't hard to pick that the intention was going to be there to try and get an Everest slot. Whereas Lady Shenandoah, you went from Friday on to say this is going to be, it's definitely a contender. By Saturday, you said, no, this could be a freak, but doesn't mean it's a betting proposition on Saturday. But what you did say was you expected whatever it did to launch off this second up. So what did Headwall do? What did Lady Shenandoah do? And now what type of projection can you have for Lady Shenandoah going forward?
Yeah, well, firstly, what's going on with just out of curiosity, Mornington Glory? They go to Sydney? It's going plus 1.8. I don't get it, right?
Why?
What's going on there? Yeah. That's crazy. So that was the pace. And not too many takers that wanted to own that heat in the first section. Mind you, the 3 horses that were above benchmark through that first couple, and that's moving, Ralphie, right? They all finished third last, second last, and last. A clear sign, not the smartest of them. Now, mind you, I have to say, Ostraka third, next closest, benchmark, did well. Now, Lady Shenandoah, 2.5 lengths below benchmark first section. I felt that was excellent. Headwall, 3.3. So Headwall is giving it a little bit of a head start initially, Ralphie, right? Then the move, obviously, in the middle. Headwall's gone with a 3-length mid-race squeeze. Lady Shenandoah, 1.7.
And one's in traffic and one isn't.
Yep, correct. And then last 400 metres. Headwall's 5.7 versus 5.1. But here's where you see it. The impact for Lady Shenandoah in the bit of traffic, the way I measured it, Ralphie, in the split times between the 4 and the 2, is minimum 1.4 lengths. Then you look at the last 200 metres, advantage Lady Shenandoah of 0.6. Now, still not in complete air, right? Adding those two factors together, that's a comfortable 2 lengths, let's say. Comfortable. So I have no doubt who the winner would have been. Now, in terms of projections, the trials, everything, I just couldn't help but feel that this horse was definitely going to this run half run short, for sure. And it was all about keeping the speed, and the speed was on display. Ralphie just didn't get if this horse had the clear running space from the 300 metres to the finish line, well, the margin would have been minimum 2, and it could have been extended. I'm just saying minimum 2 lengths, and that's over 1,000 metres. Profile-wise, in terms of where the horse is, now we factor in last campaign, half a length above benchmark. This particular run has come in plus 1.5. Now, I've dialed in that it's somewhere between plus 1.5, plus 3.5 because of what's happened in the race. But I can't rubber stamp that. It's just a personal factoring that I'm putting in. Now, the reason why I do that is because I'm looking at my projected forecast. So when I put my graph up, is where do I put the tail? Now, before the race, the trials were saying to me, Ralphy, now, this is me spitballing, right? Analysing data. I can never be certain that I'm going to be on point, but I've seen enough of it, right? I said he's going to improve 6. Now, if this is the case, right, it peaked with a 4.1. 1.5, I might be out now that I've got the data. It's going to be around 4 or 5 lengths improvement because the signal is clear that this horse is going to improve around 4 or 5 lengths off that first up run of last prep and perhaps not 6 like I initially stated. So this now brings the horse squarely into the plus 6 range, and you can start guessing how much do you want to allow. If the horse had the clear run, could we stretch it out to 7 or 8? Right now, we're looking at a plus 6 horse.
You are saying Lady Shenandoah is a big Everest winning contender.
Yeah, well, obviously I'm going to be very keen to do the work on the Hong Kong horse.
Rising.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to seeing a trial because we'll definitely get insight on that. Reality is, of course, right now it does have the measure on the number, right? But not by a long way, and certainly not worthy of being anything remotely odds on.
All right, so a couple of things here. Private Harry's the second favourite. It trialled last week. A members bonus, we are going to discuss the trial of Private Harry, what you learnt from that. And also Kaying Rising won yesterday as expected, $5. But by next Monday's podcast, the members bonus, we will do a deep dive into Kaying Rising's performance. And in fact, I did get a members email, which I always like going to, that requesting as such. It was from Justin. Yeah, bit of a long shot. If Vince gets a chance to run the clock over Kaying Rising, I'd like to know how it's IVR WTI on Sunday stack up against Australian horses are more exposed on wet tracks, Priasa, Jimmy Star, Lady Shenandoah, etc. Completely understand if this is one for the week after with Vince. Yes, it will be the week after. So, Justin, you're on point there. We're going to discuss that next week. So if you want to become a member, members bonus, get the little bonus podcast, well, most weeks of the year, racetrackralphy.com.au, click through the links and we give you the latest information from Vince's daily sectionals there. So that's a big performance. I should also ask you about Jimmy Star, who's got the slot. So there was no real need to learn off Jimmy Star, but other than to learn, what did he do with his sustained 800-metre close from too far back?
Yeah, and I just wanted to say to what you were saying for the members, what we'll also do, Ralph, is I'll put the schematic blueprint up for Kaying Rising that you can flick out to all the members.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So that'll be a direct email.
Yeah, and maybe we can then do other little comparisons, but that'll give you real insight on how this horse is projected and looking for Australia, and then one can start making their own decisions. But we've had at least one horse emerge, Ralphie, and that's Lady Shenandoah. Now, Jimmy Star. Yeah. Okay. 5.6 lengths below benchmark for a split time. Obviously, from the way I'm looking at it, it was borderline whether you're in the right spot or not the right spot in terms of, being effective. Would I have liked to have given that sort of a head start to Lady Shenandoah Headwall? It's debatable. But the move in the mid certainly didn't go missing. Plus 6 Ralphie, best in the race. Last 400. Surprisingly, not the best last 400. Plus 5.6. That went to Tiger Shark, Ralphie. And I went and had another look, right? I go, yeah, just make sure of this. And I go, yeah, that was huge. I don't know where that's come from, right? But it was massive. It actually outsprinted Jimmy. Which just for me personally surprised me. It actually outsprinted everybody.
Second start for Clayton Douglas, and probably and Winter fit, whereas Jimmy Starr that was your kickoff run. So I suppose that explains that to an extent. So what's Jimmy Starr done projection wise, or does it learn anything, or is that just your perfect kickoff run?
Well, 0.3 is the starting point above benchmark. What does that all mean for the horse? Well, you've got to look at. I keep going back to this about this trial, that Gosford trial. Like that move over the last 400 metres of Jimmy Starr in the trial, it was 15 lengths squeeze, Ralphy, over the last 400 metres, like the back half of the trial, and it was a +5. And mind you, the trial before was very similar, like just monster explosion. Maybe it's possible that had just little ripple effects. Now, in terms of where we see this horse moving on to from there, it's coming behind its profile, which is, as crazy as it sounds, not good. And it's not it's not a real resemblance of what it'd been doing in the trial. So I'm going to have to say two things right now. Number one, could have been somewhat flattened. Now, he's got to start. It doesn't really matter, right? Because they've got the golden target and they've got, if not one of the best trainers in the world that's capable of doing that. But in terms of where its starting point is, it's genuinely 2 lengths behind its mark. And that's usually a signal that they're not going to traject beyond their profile of previous campaign PB. So right now, this horse sits somewhere squarely in the 3.8, 4.3 zone. That's definitely not going to win you an Everest. So
this year,
no, Mar's going to have to find a few lengths, and maybe we're going to see it. We'll just have to wait and see.
Last of the stakes races was the Tramway, won by Pericles. As you heard in that intro, I had this inkling, Vince, that Bjorn Baker was going to want to put on a show for the Blue Jackets. The other question was Private Eye. Was Nash going to get it on his terms? Well, he did get it on his terms. Pericles coming to play, but you're going to tell us a bit about some mid-race work there as well that may have helped the winner and disadvantaged the runner-up, I dare say.
Yeah, well, Private Eye, first of all, beautiful, 0.8 below benchmark, good tempo for the day. Pericles, 2.9 lengths below benchmark. This has to be tabled. Now, Nash is just a master, but just that fraction too much easing. I mean, you look at Pericles, 8 to the 4. Bang on, it's gone 2.9 first section below benchmark, 8 to the 4, same, 2.9. Nash, 0.8 below, minus 3.7. So the switch, comparing the two horses, it's 2.8 lengths. Slow down. Actually helped bring Pericles into the race. And then, clearly visible over the last 400 metres. Pericles dominant with a plus 4.4. Private Eye couldn't re-accelerate as effectively that we know this horse can, only posted a 1.9. Further franking, had there been less movement in the mid, in other words, easing, just 1 length, the margin, it would have been a head finish either way. So that's how tight it was. And I just felt that Nash on this occasion, just that 1 length too much conservative. Maybe he felt super comfortable and he could just ease at that extra length, and didn't work for him on this occasion.
All right, if you want the IVR reports, you can get them via the Sizzlers, which also includes my Black Book write-ups there. So go to my website there, racetrackralphy.com.au, click through the Sizzlers, and you'll get that for September. All Vince Cardi's works via, of course, dailysexuals.com.au. Just one more question before we wound up, Vince. I just got to back the track up for Scott. Generosity had a dead set jog around in traffic. He said anything in the micro splits that can tell us a bit about Generosity. He's running the Concorde, set her up for the future. The eye, she looked like she was a coiled spring buried straight away on the fence with nowhere to go. She swaps positions with Lady Shenandoah, was one off the fence and finally got a gap. It was breathtaking. That never came for Generosity. Generosity finishes on the podium. Was that the hidden run of the race? So an obvious real talent there from the Wally Yard, having its first start XWA. Did it do anything on the clock that we can get insight from, given that obviously, as Scotty said, it was an RDO in traffic?
Yes, well, obviously it was an RDO in traffic, but let's look at a few things. 3.9 below benchmark, head wall 3.3. So in terms of that first couple of 100 metres, golden, only half length behind it. In the mid, they both virtually travelled the same speed, 0.3 below versus 0.5 below. Last 400, how much are we going to attribute to the traffic? Of 2.7 last 400 versus 5.7. Now, when I look at the intel sort of does indicate, despite the overall decline in overall acceleration over the last 200 metres, there's a number of factors that tied into that. Was there 2 lengths? I'm not sure there was 2 lengths, but there was definitely at least 1 to 1.5 lengths. Now, if I pull that back into it and say I'll give it the whole 2 lengths, which is more than what I feel it's entitled to, that still leaves you 1 length short if we're comparing it directly to Headwall. Now, is this horse going to just leapfrog off that run? Of course it is. Absolutely. But it probably needs to make sure it's avoiding those other 2 horses.
Yeah, that's absolutely the point. So she's a nice horse, but she ain't that. What we did, so that, speaking of Wallace debut runner, there was one at Moonee Valley. Oh, wow, Angel Capital, was that something? He does love getting him to come to play when he wants to learn a bit about him. So that was a huge run there. Barrackhill won the Moya. We're ticked over our half-hour mark, so that'll be part of our members bonus. So we're going to have a good look at Barrackhill, Angel Capital, and some other Moonee Valley highlights, including, as I said, a couple of big trials such as Headwall from not Headwall, of course, Private Harry from last week. We can get some real insights there. So if you want to become a member, get our bonuses ongoing and support the fact we're independent. Now, when we say we're independent, that doesn't mean we're backed by corporate bookmakers and independent of I don't know what. We are independent of everyone. We just do our own work. Thanks to Vince Cardi's daily sectionals work. If you want to get his race speed profiles on Saturday, go to his website. And if you want to get our preview podcast, the Mackay BD Stakes Day, there's an audio only top up if you're an existing daily sectionals member, and you can go via my website as well, racetrackralphy.com.au. In the meantime, thanks so much for being a listener of Year Round Carnival.